Far too often, science is presented as suppressing ideas that conflict with its own, and building its ideas on false assumptions, as though it were some kind of egotistical, self-important human being. To consider science in this way is to completely miss the purpose and point of all scientific endeavour and inquiry. Science serves a singular purpose, which is to find the truth. To do so, it first formulates an idea about what is going on or what happened beforehand in the universe. Then it works out what must be affected by the process the idea describes, and what that in turn also means for other processes. Finally, it attempts to actually directly observe the process described or its direct effects upon those other aspects of the universe in order to gain information on whether the idea is actually as described, slightly skew or entirely accurate. If the idea turns out to be slightly off, science doesn't suppress the data saying so. Instead, it acknowledges that it made that mistake and modifies the idea to fit the results, never the results to fit the idea. Lastly, if the idea turns out to be entirely false, it is thrown out and a new idea is actually contemplated in order to inevitably dig down to what is actually going on. Scientific inquiry used to be fairly lax, with infamous individuals in history such as Galen, who construed what the human skeleton would look like based on various primates, and Benjamin Hawkins, who famously created the wildly inaccurate Crystal Palace dinosaur models. Our scientific inquiry today, in light of people like that, is subject to rigorous scrutiny, both by managing boards to ensure ethical and moral conduct in the experiments, and by peer review to ensure that the information is actually accurate. Whilst it is true that profoundly important concepts are occasionally overthrown, this is increasingly unlikely, because as evidence is discovered to counter an existing theory, the next theory to replace it utilizes that new evidence in its own manner in order to actually define itself, creating a theory that is increasingly more accurate. Science, however, does not declare anything to be fact without first proving it beyond reasonable doubt against its competitors, such as evolution versus intelligent design. I know I have some viewers that will believe in intelligent design, but I'm sorry, it no longer stands to credence. Lastly, when debating, don't throw out evidence because it is based on some scientific theory that you do not personally ascribe to. Firstly, a theory in scientific terminology is not quite what the word itself actually means. It's a collection of ideas that fall under the same umbrella to describe a greater overarching process. Evolution, for example, again, includes abiogenesis, adaptation, and speciation, among other ideas. Secondly, if you don't subscribe to that particular school of thought, your opponent in the debate evidently does, and so dismissing it out of hand does not further your case. If possible, instead, try to get them to provide evidence in support of their interpretation of the theory, to try and poke holes in it, in a reasonable fashion, of course, not just pointing out the semantics of language used to describe it. And if you can reasonably disprove it, or argue that the issue beyond reason, get them to move on to another piece of evidence. Similarly, try not to present a theory that you do not personally understand. You don't need to know it to the finest mathematical detail, but you should always present a theory you know a few pieces of supporting evidence for, in order to provide such evidence if your opponent finds issue with it. And I cannot stress this enough, don't press the issue if you present your evidence. Rebuke your opponent's issues, and they still don't accept it. If they deny the evidence regardless of what you do to support it, they're unlikely to accept it if you continue shoving it in their faces. Instead, move to another piece of evidence. For example, I've had to argue evolution using radiocarbon dating against younger creationists, who deny carbon dating to be evidential of actual age. So I have moved on to genetic heritage evidence and dog breeds instead of pressing the matter. If you doggedly stick to one piece of evidence, it gives the impression that it is the only evidence supporting your case, weakening it as you defend it like King Canute, fiercely denying the ocean at his feet. So to summarize for this video, science should be considered accurate unless proven otherwise by the opposition. It has no ego to force it to conspire against ideas. But don't stick to one gun when presenting evidence to support your case.